Ash is what was left when I collapsed at work. Burnt out, discarded, the remnants of who I used to be. Iron is who I became after the fire. The self that was forged when the old one couldn't survive. This is Ash and Iron, a podcast for anyone who's been broken by the systems they were told to trust and rebuilt themselves anyway. For the ones who burned out, for the ones who were pushed past their limits, for the ones who were told to be grateful for exhaustion, for the ones who walked through the fire and came out unrecognizable to who they were before. Here, we talk about collapse without shame and transformation without apology. I'm Aiden, and this is the space where we sift through the ash, name what burned, and claim the iron that remains. Welcome to Ash and Iron. Let's begin. Before we begin, let me state for the record that all workplaces, names, and locations have been changed, and these are reimagined narratives inspired by true events. Not to protect them, but to protect me from summoning the pugnacious corporate Beetlejuice back into my inbox. The last time he appeared, he brought a spreadsheet, the 11th plague, and a tone that suggested my humanity was optional. Honestly, I'm still waiting for FEMA to declare that email a disaster zone. Alright, into the fire we go. In episode 1, I told you I worked for a well-known legacy children's publication, which is true. But that's the version you give strangers so they don't tilt their head at you with concern, or worse, try to lay hands on you in the produce aisle and pray the corporate demons out of your spine. Because the real version, the one I didn't say out loud, is that behind the wholesome branding and the cheerful mascot, there was a workplace that felt less like a magazine and more like a pastel-colored cult with a dental plan. This magazine was a beacon of hope for me as a child. As an adult, it felt more like a haunted Build-A-Bear workshop, where the bears file HR complaints and the stuffing is made of shredded performance reviews and what remained of my coping mechanisms. So for the sake of honesty, and because anytime I dared to ask a real question, corporate Beetlejuice would appear in my inbox, like a summoned demon with a spreadsheet. As he emerged from the copier, glowing with fluorescent rage, I'm going to call this fictitious employer Hopscotch Magazine. Their mascot, Benny the Badger, grinned from every corner with the dead-eyed enthusiasm of a creature legally required to promote literacy. But the moment your metrics dropped, Benny transformed into Benny the Burnout Badger, baring those razor-sharp teeth like he'd been waiting all week for the chance to feast on your self-esteem. Hopscotch wasn't a company. It was a pastel-drenched cult run by things that looked like people, but fed like predators. The building itself was part of the ritual, a quiet machine designed to harvest whatever life you had left. Hopscotch Magazine looked adorable from the outside. Blindingly bright colors, wholesome branding so pure it could give you a cavity. A kid-friendly badger mascot who looked like he spent his weekends rescuing puppies and teaching kindness workshops. It was the kind of place where people would clasp their hands together and say, "Oh wow, that must be such a magical job." And I'd smile and say, "Absolutely," while quietly calculating how many hours of sleep I'd lost that week and whether my soul came with a manufacturer's warranty. Hopscotch loved to talk about self-care. They worshipped it. They sprinkled it into emails like glitter, like fairy dust, like a legally required garnish on top of a flaming dumpster. Usually, in the same message where they assigned 3 new projects and a deadline that violated OSHA, physics, and whatever ancient treaty prevents human sacrifice. They'd attach a pastel mindfulness worksheet, a cartoon badger reminding me to breathe, as if that was going to stop me from astral projecting out of my body during meetings. I'd hover above myself like a Sims character whose needs bars were all flashing red, watching my mortal form nod politely while my soul quietly packed a suitcase and tried to flee the building. They called us a family, which is corporate code for we will emotionally manipulate you into working weekends, and you will thank us for the opportunity. Also, we're out of coffee. Again. People didn't quit Hopscotch, they just vanished. One day they were there, the next day their team's icon went gray forever, and everyone pretended it was normal. Like a children's version of The Leftovers, but with more clip art and fewer answers. Leaving Hopscotch wasn't a resignation, it was an exorcism, a pastel-colored cult escape. I half expected someone to chase me out with a branded crucifix and a PTO request form. And ash and iron is what happens when you finally stop pretending the place that raised you didn't also try to eat you alive. When I started at Hopscotch, I was ecstatic for the opportunity. I knew I was a hard worker, and the company's public image projected care and trust. I was excited because I thought maybe I found the place my work ethic would be appreciated, instead of exploited. I was so wrong. Olympic gold level wrong. So wrong, I should have gotten a refund from the universe and a commemorative "Oops" card signed by God himself. I had taken a decent pay cut to work there, because their mission aligned with my personal belief system. I had been harmed by previous jobs, and thought maybe the pastel soft public image meant I was safe here. Little did I know this was another Annabelle situation. Horror, wrapped in a child's narrative. Except this time, the doll had a LinkedIn profile and a kink for pips. She also endorsed me for resilience, which felt like a hate crime. I ignored the early signs in my first week, the push to skip breaks, the excrement-soaked laptop that mysteriously quit working 2 days after Mandy, the clueless executive, brought it in. At that point, I should have realized I wasn't onboarding. I was being initiated into a cult that worshipped chaos, poor decisions, and whatever unholy creature lived in Mandy's laptop bag. I'm convinced it had its own employee ID and a better benefits package. Honestly, the laptop had the right idea trying to escape. I should have followed it out the door and into witness protection. At some point during the great Hopscotch office migration, which felt less like a move and more like a pastel-themed Oregon Trail, where the only thing dying of dysentery was my spine, something of mine went missing. Not company equipment, not anything valuable to anyone but me. Just a small personal item I always kept in the same place. The kind of thing you don't misplace. Unless you've suddenly developed amnesia, slipped into another dimension, or possessed by a Victorian child ghost who hates accessories and joy. When I brought it up, the reaction I got told me more about the culture than the missing item ever could. It wasn't concern. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't even the classic corporate non-answer of, "We'll look into it," which is HR speak for, "We will absolutely not look into it, but we will quietly add your name to a list written in red ink." Instead, I got a gentle but unmistakable nudge to drop it. And when I mentioned filing a police report, because that's what you do when your belongings vanish into the corporate Bermuda Triangle, someone in a position of authority hinted that pursuing it might not be in my best interest, which is corporate code for, "We can't stop you, but we can absolutely make your life feel like a haunted escape room, where the only prize is unemployment, and a coupon for regret." And here's the thing, it was never about the item. It was about the message. The message that silence was safer than honesty. The message that convenience mattered more than integrity. The message that raising a concern, even a valid one, quietly marked you as a problem, a disruption, a ghost they'd prefer not to acknowledge unless you were haunting the break room, like the lingering smell of microwaved seafood from 2003. And that's when I realized something I didn't have the language for at the time. This was the blueprint. The same blueprint we talked about in episode 1. The one that teaches you the rules without ever writing them down. The one that whispers, don't ask questions. Don't disrupt the illusion. Don't expect accountability. And for the love of God, don't file paperwork. Also, stop making eye contact with the cursed plaque. It knows. Looking back, that moment was the quiet warning label printed in invisible ink. The first crack in the pastel paint. The whisper from the cursed Employee of the Month plaque saying, "Hey, something here isn't right, bro. Blink twice if you need an exorcist." And as if that omen wasn't enough, winter arrived and delivered its own performance review. I stepped into the parking lot one morning and immediately learned that Hopscotch didn't believe in salting anything except wounds. I slipped, achieved accidental flight, and landed with the grace of a Victorian chimney sweep falling. When I mentioned it, the response was basically, "Yeah, that happens." Like I'd reported a minor weather update instead of my spine attempting to unionize. That was the moment I realized Hopscotch didn't just ignore safety. It treated bodily harm as a character-building exercise. I didn't know it then, but this was the moment Hopscotch stopped being a job and started being a case study. The moment the long story of Ash and Iron actually began to grow into a voice. A voice that said, "Oh, we're not surviving this. We are documenting it." Before the descent officially began, Sherry, the tech overlord, called me. Not with help, not with solutions, not with anything resembling human communication. No. This was the kind of call where someone speaks in vague, calming riddles that feel like they were scripted by a haunted mirror trying to qualify for management. "We want you to feel empowered to bring concerns to us," she cooed, in the same tone you'd use to soothe a Victorian child ghost. "And we'd really appreciate you keeping everything internal. Hopscotch thrives on rainbows, sunshine, and absolutely no outside narratives." Then she added, far too cheerfully, "And we're so glad you didn't make a big deal about that little slip in the parking lot. A bruise builds character. The limp will fade, probably." "We?" I asked. That's when I noticed Benny had materialized on the team's call like a corporate cryptid. He was holding a banner that read, "Traction is a choice," in Comic Sans, smiling like he'd personally salted the lot with hopes and dreams instead of actual salt. I hung up with a distinct sense that I'd just been politely warned by someone who couldn't legally admit they were warning me, the corporate equivalent of a cursed fortune cookie. My award for pulling off the move? I got to coordinate and perform another move, where everyone in the main building got to play musical chairs. Deja who? Stockholm called. He wants his syndrome back. Needless to say, I pulled it off as well as 3 vertebrae. But I was lucky to have the job. Lucky in the same way a killer in a horror film walks past your hiding spot. Only because the plot needs you alive. At this point, I could feel a pip forming in the atmosphere, like a storm front. My ticket numbers had dipped, not because I wasn't working, but because I was coordinating 2 building-sized office moves, while also trying to exist as a mortal human who occasionally needed a laptop to answer emails. Apparently, not having my device surgically fused to my hands meant I was failing the sacred rituals. Unacceptable. God would judge me for my sins. And so would Sherry. Sherry the tech overlord. All the power, all the charm, all the menace of a fairy tale villain disguised as a customer service representative. I'm still convinced she carried at least 3 poison apples in her purse. 1 for emergencies, 1 for flair, and 1 labeled "For Aiden" with a smiley face, all written in glitter gel pen. Right next to them was her bag of Pip candy, which she handed out like Halloween treats from hell. Ironically, Benny the Burnout Badger's email signature looked exactly like the wrapper. This told me to push harder, prove I'm valuable, prove that I still had the work ethic I thought I did when I started 6 months prior. I ended up taking on several projects at the same time. I'm good at multitasking. I learned to double fist energy drinks and cry in the bathroom simultaneously. Efficiency is key. At one point, I was answering emails, coordinating a vendor, updating documentation, and having a quiet existential crisis in a supply closet. A level of multitasking no one should put on a resume, but I absolutely could. Skills: Excel, Outlook, and dissociating at 120 words per minute. If burnout were a sport, I would have won the Super Bowl. Benny the Burnout Badger had nothing on me, and his job description was to smile as your soul caught fire. One of the few genuinely good souls at Hopscotch, a coworker who had become a real friend, eventually drew the wrong kind of attention. Not because they failed, not because they slacked, but because they committed the ultimate hopscotch sin. They took their lunch. Not pastel Kool-Aid. Not crisis-flavored adrenaline. Actual food, like a human with organs. Hopscotch reacted as if they'd staged a coup. Suddenly, they were buried under tasks that defied physics, deadlines that violated human rights, and feedback that sounded less like coaching and more like a ritualistic chant, meant to break the spirit and summon compliance. The pastel veneer slipped. The cult mask cracked. And Sherry, the tech overlord herself, reached into her purse and pulled out her bag of pips, like a witch selecting the correct hex for the evening. My friend did not drink the Kool-Aid. They didn't bow. They didn't apologize for needing calories. They simply refused to participate in the narrative. And then they left. Not quit. Left. Like someone stepping out of a simulation once they realize the sky is painted cardboard and the sun is just a fluorescent bulb flickering over a break room no one is allowed to sit in. To this day, I respect them more than anyone who survived that place. They didn't just walk away from a job. They escaped a pastel-colored cult with their soul intact. He escaped on a Tuesday. I mourned for approximately 5 minutes before corporate threw a new onboarding at my face like a grenade with a pastel bow on it. The pin was already pulled. Let's call her Regina. The first red flag should have been that the onboarding request came from Benny the Burnout Badger. Normal corporate emails don't come with an audio attachment of the hierarchy chanting synergy ominously, do they? Asking for a friend. Anyways, I had less than 4 hours until her onboarding, yet I pulled it off. Regina didn't think so, though. Apparently, my failure to set up her personal devices and import her personal email contacts into the corporate system was an unforgivable sin. The kind of transgression that, in a pastel-colored cult, gets you quietly added to a watch list. She reported this grave offense to Louisa, the corporate people tamer, and to Sherry, who treats boundaries the way Victorian ghosts treat sunlight. And of course, the complaint slid down the corporate pipeline like a greased omen, transforming into poor performance by the time it reached my inbox. A neat little accusation wrapped in HR-approved language and the faint smell of doom. I swear, I heard Benny sharpening his teeth in the next cube over. That slow, rhythmic scrape mascots should not be able to make. The sound of a cartoon badger preparing to feast on another soul who dared to question the narrative. Because nothing says professionalism like demanding your personal hotmail be spiritually merged with the corporate exchange server, as if the only thing standing between Hopscotch and total collapse was me not syncing Regina's Hotmail contacts with the pastel-colored hive mind. Dear Hopscotch, relax. You're not saving lives. You're siphoning them through a pastel straw and calling it culture. The same week, Hopscotch held one of its many layoff ceremonies, a pastel-themed purge they treated like a seasonal tradition, because nothing says, "We're a family," like quietly removing cousins from the group photo to protect the quarterly budget. They spoke about it with the same reverence people use for meteor showers or eclipses, a sacred ritual, a cleansing, a sacrifice to the almighty spreadsheet. Nothing screams, "We care," like offering employees to the bottom line gods, while the mascot smiles in the background like he's blessing the harvest. The returned equipment started coming in, and the remaining coworkers were underwater. So I devised a system, a workflow, so any mass equipment returns could be tagged, documented, and processed in an organized fashion. Returned equipment that reeked of tears, shattered hopes of retirement, and the first time I saw Hopscotch's complete disconnection from empathy or humanity through the lens of ash and iron. It was like handling relics of a fallen civilization, only the civilization was last Tuesday, and their team statuses weren't even offline yet. Within a month, after I'd streamlined workflows, resurrected half the tech graveyard, and saved the company enough money to fund a small moon landing, I was rewarded with a promotion. What a relief, my hard work paid off. I was given a whole dollar raise to absorb another full-time role. Meanwhile, Benny, who had contributed nothing but ominous vibes and a suspiciously well-timed immune system, got a $5 raise to keep doing exactly what he'd been doing. They even gave him a complimentary booster shot, allegedly effective against Sherry's poison apples. Must be nice. Slap in the face, but okay. Benny was in the promotion meeting, laughing in the way mascots shouldn't be able to laugh. The kind of laugh that makes you wonder if you're the protagonist or the sacrifice. Was I the new Donnie Darko? As time went on, I realized I wasn't just doing my job. I was doing everyone's job. Plural. Multiple full-time roles, duct taped together and handed to me like a party favor from hell. When I asked about pay, I was told, in the gentlest threat imaginable, that if I kept asking, I might not have a job at all. Same answer when I asked about the workload for my so-called promotion. Apparently, curiosity was a fireable offense. Benny confirmed this with a Teams message that was just a gif of Miranda Priestley shaking her head, the corporate equivalent of being smacked with a rolled-up newspaper. Then it hit me. Was I Donnie Darko and Andy Sachs, the doomed protagonist and the overworked assistant, the chosen burnout and the sacrificial intern? A 2-for-1 special in the Hopscotch cinematic universe? Because nothing says career growth like being spiritually crushed by a mascot holding a latte and a performance review. This is Ash and Iron. We have to keep Benny at bay with his pip chainsaw. Was that ketchup on the blade? If this offends you or makes you feel called out or seen, that's just the cursed Employee of the Month plaque whispering your name again. All workplaces, names, and locations have been changed for fear of corporate Beetlejuice materializing in my inbox and demanding another meeting with Benny the Badger that should have been an exorcism, performed by someone with OSHA certification. See you in the ashes.